I don't mind the term African American. I don't want to be called African American.
Why is that?
I'm not African.
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois.
As you're aware, in 1912, Dr. Walter Plecker became the first director of the Bureau of Vital Statistics. But he was part of the eugenics movement, which is a movement about creating one race of people, which was white, and everything else was put in a pot, as Tina Marie would say, and stir it up and call colored.
But basically, when he was the registrar for the Bureau of Vital Records, he changed the names of Indian people in Southampton County.
Exactly.
Their race from Indian to Negro or colored.
Well, it was referred to as colored.
The most significant thing here is to reveal the much greater amounts of Native American ancestry that are present within the African American population than most people realize, because they might have been misled by the use of terms like mulatto and also people of color.
Some of us started here in this land. Everybody wasn't brought over from Africa.
It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. That the Indians were you.
Ask about our lineage. Who are we? We're Black Americans. I can trace my family back, my ancestors back to the 1700s. Okay? So we're Black Americans. We have been here since the founding of the country. That matters, does it not? Does it matter that our parents, our ancestors were here since the founding, since the 1600s, since the 1700s? Is that relevant? Is that significant? Yes, I think it is. Well, I mean, my ancestors didn't slave and sweat and, toil and all that hard work that they did for Joanne Reed to have a job. She's from the Congo. They worked for Black Americans to have jobs. They did all that for Black Americans, not people from the Congo who are first-generation Americans. Not even Kamala Harris, who's Indian American and Jamaican.
Right.
My ancestors didn't work for Kamala Harris to have these benefits. They worked for Black Americans to have benefits. I think even Obama is not even a Black American. This is why using color, the skin color, is not sufficient. It's confusing.
Right.
And this is why I say white Americans and Black Americans have been in America the longest since its founding. And that is significant. That matters. That history matters. And so this is why, and I don't know why so many, and I want to get into this issue about Black women, Black American women supporting. I know it's nonprofit, but Black American women don't understand most of them, some do, but most of them don't understand. They think everything is about skin color. And that's a superficial analysis of the situation. They're not looking at the history. They don't know the history. And they're just so wedded to the political left position, embracing all of their policies. And their policies have been detrimental to Black America. They need to get away from that embrace of all these policies that are the detriment. So what I'm thinking, they're not doing their homework. They're not reading this cast your bucket where you are. Cast down your bucket where they're not reading this history. They're being superficial. They're just watching the television and going along with what the politicians say. That is not sufficient. About our
I just want to say hello.
Hello. Hey, how y'all doing? Happy Educational Friday. What's up? Shout out to everybody in the building. Y'all, I wanted to come to y'all today and talk about the economics of Black Americans in our history. For the longest, I was wondering, I was like, how? Because when I first heard a long time ago that Black Americans were not as bad off economically as we were taught, I thought it was crazy. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it literally makes no sense. All history in school, both high school, middle school, elementary, college, and beyond, all teach that Black Americans in the South especially, but Black Americans were, poor. We were broke, we were slaves, woo. And then for the longest, after hearing that and not understanding everything, and it's taken a while, I kept saying it don't make sense. How is it that we had all this and we were this, that, and a third, and the roles were reversed, but now we're here? How do they get this power? And as time went by, I'm starting to pay attention, and I'm realizing it's a multitude of things happening at one time, attacking us at multiple different times at the same time. Multiple things at the same time attacking us. And that's how we lost things. So it made me think about the economics during the Jim Crow era. And that's what this live is about, right? And when I say Jim Crow, most people think Jim Crow, they think the 60s, Martin Luther King, they think that era. Yeah, but that was the very end of Jim Crow. Jim Crow actually started in the late 1800s. So this Jim Crow era encompassed a whole lot that literally flipped the economics of Black America to where we are now, to where we're all beholden to the powers that be, meaning most people can't independently own anything. I don't care what color you are, but in this particular situation, Black Americans, you can't literally, because even if you independently own the business, you probably outsourcing distribution. Like it's just, at one point we had everything. And it was slowly taken away by not only the enemy, people we perceive to be the enemy, but also people who are us and people who look like us who ain't us, okay? So we got to get that up, and that's what this live is about. So all encompassing around this time in this Jim Crow era, you got a whole lot of stuff popping off at this time. So let's go over some things. First of all, let's start with World War I, World War II, the Great Migration. Let's not forget all of the race riots and Tulsa stuff going on. Then we got the KKK. All this is happening. What else I got written down? The Great Depression. All of this is happening simultaneously. And all of these things happening the way that they're happening in the time that they're happening is a way that they're flipping the wealth from Black Americans over to the clears. Now, remember, we had our own economy, meaning we were circulating and capable of circulating our dollar within ourselves. So that means if I went and I worked at a grocery store that Mr. Brown owns. Mr. Brown's is a Black man. So when he paid me my money and I go shopping for my clothes, I'm shopping at a Black-owned beauty, place. Or when I'm going to get my hair done, the people who doing my hair is Black-owned. The grocery store that I'm going to is Black-owned. The pharmacy, everywhere that I'm going, I'm putting my Black dollar back into the Black hand. And this is what's called economic independence. This was a lot of things that was happening during and before Jim Crow. This is why the enemy was coming at us in so many different ways, because they needed all this to happen. Somebody else put this in the chat too. Another thing that was happening during this time, the interstate system. The interstates have been strategically placed through affluent, independent Black economic neighborhoods. I know in New Orleans on Claiborne Street is where I-10 runs through. And that was a very affluent, very spiritual, yet and still very Black affluent area in Louisiana. Same place in all places. I did a whole video on it on this channel where we talked about the interstate in, was it FDR? Don't get me the line. One of them presidents, how they implemented it and how strategically they put it in places where it was Black towns that were doing really well. Same in Miami, same in New York, Jersey, St. Louis, everywhere, Houston, Dallas, everywhere where it's Black owned or was Black owned and it was Black success. That's where your interstates was directly input. And the way they were able to sneak this in is, you know how they be hiding stuff in bills now? They were doing that back then. And by the time you realize it, it's already too late. They already ready to break ground. They've already signed the paperwork and everything. So all of this is happening in this Jim Crow era. Remember, Jim Crow only ended in the 70s, 60s, okay? That's when Jim Crow ended. So when we saw the Martin Luther King, the Mike era, the We Shall Overcome, singing in an old Negro spiritual, we're not realizing we are at the very end of said Jim Crow era. And I'm going to tell you what I believe. I believe that the Jim Crow era was implemented purposely for multiple reasons, but as it pertains to Black Americans, to transfer the wealth. Because while they were extracting wealth, businesses and things from Black Americans, provisions were being made for foreigners coming in through Ellis Island, aka a lot of the clears. So meaning they were getting GI bills through the military, fighting through wars. That gave them a leg up. They had redlining. They were doing a lot of gentrification. So they were basically, just like now, clear people moving into affluent Black neighborhoods one at a time. And the next thing you know, you look up and they got half the neighborhood All of this stuff is happening at the same time. And that's what this live is about. And I'm so happy that you guys are here. So excited to share some of the stuff that I found. Okay. Now, before we get started, I want to start on a positive note. Let's start on what was happening in Black America. Now, wasn't obviously everybody. So let's be clear when we get into this live. There are poor Black Americans. There are middle-class Black Americans. There are well-to-do, AKA rich Black Americans. There are poor whites. There are middle-class whites. And then there are well-to-do, AKA rich whites. Every culture has separate classes. So when I'm talking about this is not the norm for everybody. Just like everybody wasn't a slave, everybody wasn't doing well. Everybody didn't own businesses. If that was the case, then who would patronize the businesses? So let's really be clear about this. But what we're showing is there was much more of a balance, probably tipped more in our favor than we know, because we've been taught otherwise, because it's all about mental manipulation and enslaving the mind. If you enslave the mind, the body will follow. If I tell them that they're a slave and then they believe that they are a slave and that they were a slave, henceforth, now you have a new slave. Okay. So that's not what I'm saying, but I am touching on some of the stuff that none of us learned about during the time. And I ran across this video, and this video basically just kind of covers a few affluent Black millionaires and Black affluent business owners during that time. You know what else I brought up to, and that we're going to learn in this live is the skin folk that was kinfolk, but really was not for us. It's a lot of coincidences, and I'll call them that. It's a lot of coincidences and a lot of things that's happening during this time. So for instance, remember, America has spies. Okay, America has spies. And these spies are typically people that are right in your face, but you have no clue that they're spying. And I found a lot of similarities between a lot of things with Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, all these people who are going head to head beefing, which we just talked about, but the whole time they really playing on the same team. Like they playing like they beefing in front of us. But I just find a lot of coincidences that right before all these major places go down, Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois had just left. When Mound Bayou was destroyed, the way that it was Booker T. Washington who invited and wrote to the president of the United States to come down and see this. And then shortly after, unfortunately, the unfortunate happened. Okay. Same thing with WEB, with Tulsa, all these places where these folks is just popping up and coincidentally things are going left. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm just putting the stuff in your face and letting you do with that information as you please. Somebody put in the chat, Langston Hughes. Let's not even start on that whole Harlem Renaissance thing. We already went through that. And you know what it made me think about, y'all, when we went through the Harlem Renaissance? Remember, we learned that Zora Neale Hurston, most Black Americans didn't like Zora Neale Hurston because they felt like basically she was putting 20 on 10 when she described the Black American Southern experience. Remember that? Remember, even though she celebrated in Black history in 2025, the Black Americans around that time thought Zora Neale Hurston basically made the Black Americans in the South look bad, and actually she don't know what the hell she talking about. You know who that reminded me of in 2025? Turley Paper. Now, in 50 years, America is going to say that Turley Paper was this great African-American, Black American, whatever they're going to be calling us at the time, filmmaker who gave jobs to all these Black people, and he really captured the essence of Black America during the time, and Black America loved him. That's what they're going to say. But what we know is most Black Americans can't stand Turley Paper. Most Black Americans think Turley Paper got Black America all wrong. Turley Paper, Tyler Perry is the new age Zora Neale Hurston. We're living in our Zora Neale Hurston bag. That's crazy. It just was, but anyway, those people were spies. What if Turley Paper's a spy? Who knows? I mean, Kanye get drunk, not drunk. When he get off his meds, he get to saying everybody's spies. I wonder if he ever said Turley Paper. I know he said Diddy was, but who knows? But I'm just saying. It's just funny how you live through your own time and era of the same stuff you read about in history. Because Tyler Perry is definitely our Zora Neale Hurston, but American history, clear American history, will say that he was the best thing that ever happened to black people. But us in the time saying that nigga ain't worth a dime. You see what I'm saying? I'm telling you. That's why we got to start writing our own history, bro. We got to start combating this stuff. That's what I love about having these digital footprints too. Like, we can literally get up in here and discuss it, and then people later on can come back and revisit what we talking about. Because toilet paper is not what y'all think he is. Hey, if you watching this video in 2050 or 3000, baby, we did not rock with toilet paper like that. They lying. Just FYI. I hope my face pop up. I hope my lemon head ass pop up. And y'all wondering how we felt about toilet paper. We couldn't stand them. We could not stand them. Just for your FYI, okay? Now let's get into the thing. So now I got this video where they were showing these people who were doing well in that time, and I want to share it with y'all. Y'all get the likes up on the video. Let the people know we around here jostling. Happy Educational Friday. I do owe y'all an apology from last week. I did not show up. I got tied up and then got tired, literally. So my apologies for last Friday, but y'all please charge it to the game, not my heart. All right, let's get into some of these millionaires that was popping off during the time we were just po niggas.
A formidable figure in 19th century finance, Hamilton was nicknamed Prince of Darkness for his secretive and aggressive business tactics that outsmarted his rivals. The first black millionaire on Wall Street, Hamilton amassed a fortune of $2 million. That equals $250 million today. Hamilton was one of the few investors who shorted stocks during market downturns. He bested many rivals, including prominent financiers like Cornelius Vanderbilt. Hamilton challenged himself to achieve what others thought impossible, proving that determination can break barriers. Mary Ellen Pleasant's remarkable journey began.
Before we get to Mary Ellen, let's get to Hamilton really quickly. Let's really be clear about this and what we're talking about. They not talking about Black Wall Street. They not talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma. They not talking about none of that. They talking about Wall Street, right up here in New York, okay? This black man who claimed, remember, slavery happened in New York too. So let's be clear. Let's not act like because he's in New York that he gets a pass. No. Because there was slavery in New York as well. So the same situations were faced up north and south. It just looked different. Don't ever let them lie to you about that again. So how is it that this black man could really come on real Wall Street, not Black Wall Street, and make the waves that he made? Do you know why? Because just like the lottery system, just like the alcohol system, the pharmaceutical system, just like every single thing they have, they got it from us. The reason you have a lottery system or a pick 3 system or whatever cash 3, cash 6 is because we were doing something called running numbers first. So this is a big reason why they kept us out of their stuff, because they knew automatically we were better at it because we had been doing it eons before they even got here. Okay? So when you see this black man coming on Wall Street, okay, and he becomes this millionaire amongst the clears, you know them people was like, get them niggas up out of here. That's why you don't hardly see niggas on Wall Street today. And the ones you do see that be dibbling and dabbling in that, where they be ending up at? Prison. They always catch them on some type of fraud, huh? Mind you, the fraud they be catching them on, that's a Monday night for them and what they be doing. So you got to read between the lines when you be reading about stuff like this. These people, Jeremiah G. Hamilton showing you that it wasn't as black and white, cut and dry as them people said it was, because if it was, there would be no way that he would be able to do what he did. And he's one person.
Mary learned by observing others, saying,
I let books alone and studied men and women a good deal.
Mary Ellen married James Smith, a wealthy plantation owner and flour contractor. Passing as white, they helped enslaved people escape to freedom across the North and Canada. After her first husband's death, Mary Ellen married John James Pleasant, a formerly enslaved man she met through their shared work on the Underground Railroad. Armed with $15,000 from her late husband's estate, they moved to California during the gold rush to seek opportunity. Working as a cook and housekeeper, she eavesdropped on wealthy patrons and used their insights to invest in real estate, railroads, restaurants, and boarding houses. She was worth $30 million or $1 billion in today's money.
Now, y'all got to be able to read between the lines on this. So they saying that this woman, because she married an ex-slaver and she had money, that she was able to take that money and eavesdrop listening. Remember, we can't never do nothing on our own. Everything got to come from us learning it from them. That's why the stories are always going to say we learned how to read listening to them, or we learned how to do this watching them, or eavesdropping on them. So now this lady took $15,000, learned by listening and eavesdropping to clear people on how to become a billionaire. So she learned from possible thousandaires or millionaires how to become a billionaire, and they couldn't teach it to themselves. There are a lot of things that we were in control of prior to the way they teach us, and it would make sense why we were so successful, because a lot of these things were things we were already doing.
Dubbed the Black City Hall, she used her wealth to provide housing, jobs, and legal aid for Black Americans while fighting for civil rights. Annie Minerva Turnbull was born on August 9, 1869, in Metropolis, Illinois, to formerly enslaved parents. The 10th of 11 children, she discovered her passion for hairdressing while styling her sister's hair, laying the foundation for her future empire. Orphaned and raised by her older sister, Malone's interest in chemistry blossomed during her high school years in Peoria, Illinois, despite frequent illnesses forcing her to withdraw from classes. By 1900, Malone had formulated her revolutionary Wonderful Hair Grower, addressing the pressing need for gentler hair care products for Black women suffering from hair loss and scalp damage due to harsh straightening techniques. Malone began selling her product door-to-door from the back of a horse-drawn buggy, offering free treatments to attract customers and build trust in her brand. In 1902, she strategically opened her first shop in St. Louis to sell her products to the many tourists expected to visit the 1904 World's Fair.
And let's be clear, too. The reason why the Clears did a lot of, yes, Malone, y'all saw that, right? But the reason why the Clears did a lot of door-to-door salesmen is because of the stuff that we were already doing. So Malone, Madam C.J. Walker, what she was doing was taking her show on the road. A lot of Black neighborhoods around America, you can see that they still have that, or at least they used to have it when I was growing up. They used to have the man who used to ride up the street. Hey there, got the fruit, Mr. Fruit Man. If you want fruit, the man passing up, he might be saying, hey there, got the apples, got the orange, got the plums, got your peaches, got your fruit, got your fruit. You know what I'm saying? Or somebody might be walking up the street selling this, that, and the third. Like the modern day or back in the day hustle man. Remember how Hustle Man always showed up, or even in the Cosby Show, not the Cosby Show, well, Martin too, but what's the other show? Not the Jeffersons, the Good Times. Remember he said, I'm this pretty Lineage. You can get anything you want for a penny. And if I don't have it now, don't worry, because I get midnight. You know, stuff like that. That's where they get this idea of salesmanship from. This is the stuff that we've been doing since the beginning of time. So when Black people are stepping into their economy, because that's what they're doing, and into their realm, they're exceeding because naturally they're already good at it. We see the same thing happen in sports. That's why they keep us out of a lot of sports, because when we're in sports, like any of them, tennis, hockey, golf, football, basketball, it doesn't matter. We outshine them because naturally it's what we do. So but history will tell us that we just miraculously became great, but that's not how that works. But the only reason they say that to us is because they need us to believe that, so that we believe that everything we got from them. Okay?
Malone held news conferences and toured southern states to promote her products. She revolutionized the industry as she trained Poro agents, ranging from ages 16 to 80, to sell her products door-to-door and provide free demonstrations. One of Malone's agents was Sarah Breedlove, later known as Madam C.J. Walker, who later started her own competing business. Malone's business acumen shone through her use of press conferences and targeted advertising in Black newspapers, demonstrating her understanding of effective marketing strategies. Malone founded Poro College, the first Black-owned cosmetology school in the nation, providing education and jobs for Black women. By 1920, Malone's empire employed 75,000 agents nationally, creating unprecedented economic opportunities for Black women across the country. Not only did she reach millionaire status, she generously donated the equivalent of $1.5 million to support the Black community, establishing herself as—
You know what this reminds me of with this woman? So Malone isn't Madam C.J. Walker, I'm sorry. Madam C.J. Walker came up under this lady Malone. But you know what this reminds me of? Y'all ever remember like hair schools like Aveda, back in the day. Them hair schools where the clear people go, and like you go to these schools and then you can go and get cheap hairdos because you have to go to the classes. I know my mom used to send us, they had it called Stevenson's in New Orleans. Stevenson's had a hair college. So the clears have taken that blueprint that we were already doing, hair colleges, door-to-door salesmen, all that stuff. They were take Paul Mitchell. Yeah, those are the clear people like that. Mercy, Dougley, all that. That's all stuff that we were already doing. And this is why Madam C.J. Walker and this Malone woman and all these other people can be very successful because they were the first to do it. Now, they're not going to tell you that they got their concepts from these women. Why would they tell you that? But we've been doing this, since the beginning.
As one of the nation's first major Black American philanthropists. Robert Reed Church was born in 1839 in Mississippi to a white steamboat captain and an enslaved black seamstress. Despite being born into slavery, he worked as a cabin boy on his father's steamboat where he gained invaluable business skills. He survived a steamboat sinking in 1855. Then, during the Civil War, worked on a Union steamer. After the war, Church settled in Memphis, opening a saloon and investing in real estate. He seized opportunities during the yellow fever epidemic, buying properties at depressed prices. During the Memphis race riot of 1866, Church was shot while defending his property from a white mob. Undeterred, he vowed to stay in Memphis and rebuild. As one of the South's first black millionaires, during the Panic of 1907, he stopped a run on his bank by displaying stacks of money in the windows. He invested in his community by building Church's Park and Auditorium, a cultural hub for African Americans. Highly respected, Robert Reed Church left a legacy of empowerment for future generations.
So, okay, those are just a few people. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is not because the few means the many. I'm showing you this because there was a class of Black Americans who were doing exceptionally well and some that were doing just good. Either way, economically, we were independent. I want to show you, hold on. I want to show you guys this little short clip from places like, because like I said, they only teach us about Tulsa. And I don't know if y'all remember that. We talked about Mound Bayou and everything that was going on over there and how it was a safe haven in Mississippi. Here's like a little 3-minute video. Let me show y'all this so y'all can see what was happening. And this wasn't just in Mississippi. This wasn't just in certain areas. This was everywhere. Everywhere Black Americans were, we were doing well, okay? Or at least not as bad as they claim we was. Let's check this out really quickly. Sorry. Y'all get the likes up on the video.
We had a pride that a lot of people did not have. We had a pride of owning our own and being a part of our own and running whatever we had.
There's so much that the Black church has done for Black people's advancement that is still not being told. From the Underground Railroad to the Civil Rights struggle, all that time the church has been involved in the safe haven to get us to where we are.
And Mound Bayou was that haven. It was that place where people couldn't just come in and take over. They knew better. Whites had planned to come to Mound Bayou to see if they could do one of those takeovers. But the people in Mound Bayou heard about it. So there was plans in Mound Bayou too.
When the horses came in, the lights are off in the city. You turn the lights on and had the Gatling gun over in one of those houses and people on top of houses all around. They turned the lights off and started shooting.
Boy, you can hear da-da-da-da. And then another few shots and another shots. And
what this sound like? What this sound like? Don't this sound like what they did in Tulsa? So they're telling you Mound Bayou was one of them places you wasn't just about to come in. It was a Black owned, Black everything, Black millionaires and everything. And you wasn't about to come over there and play. Well, they heard and got wind that them folks was coming around there and you already saw what they said. You see, this is what they feared, okay? If you really want to know what they so scared of, it ain't the fact that this is what they feared. The opportunity to fight back. So look, it's right. Rosewood, Tulsa, New Orleans, Miami. A black man built Miami. A black American, an Indian, created Miami. Like, it's all over. It's all over. Yes, all set up by the government, allegedly.
Just about not long, they tucked tail and ran out, and you never had that threat again.
Black people at least knew in Mississippi, if you were ever in trouble anywhere else, that if you made it to Mound Bayou, you could make it to safety. We had sort of like an underground railroad. There are many stories about people who came from different places in Mississippi and got here, and they got on the train and went somewhere else just to get safe from whatever was going on. So that being known, when that trial happened and the Emmett Till case happened, of course his mother came down. She wanted to come to the trial. So not only did Mamie Till stay here, but the black press and the black public officials all stayed in Mound Bayou because in the Mississippi Delta, there was nowhere else where a black person at that time could have safe accommodations.
And that's what Mamie Till came under. She came under like an invisible shield of protection that she knew and could be comfortable, that she can go to sleep at night in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, and know that she was very well protected.
There was a caravan of armed guards taking her to and from the courthouse. They would lay her down in the back seat, put a cover over her, and take her back and forth because they had snipers out ready for them going back and forth to the courthouse.
She would later on talk about how Mound Bayou was that haven. She changed her life to be able to come the rest of her life and to just talk about the rights of African Americans.
So a lot of people don't know this, but if you were here for my Mound Bayou live that we did on Educational Friday, the Educational Friday we did, but if you weren't here, so Mamie Till, Emmett Till, now mind you, they live in Chicago, but their family is from Mississippi. Now we all know the story. Emmett Till goes down to to Mississippi and ends up dead. Well, Mamie Till, fearing her life, and Black Americans fearing her life, this is how bad Mound Bayou was. Mound Bayou had sent Black people to basically not only cover her transportation, meaning she got security all the way from Chicago, all the way to Mississippi. She had 24/7 security and surveillance to make sure that not only she was straight, anybody who's Black and inside of the press and wanted to deal with this or have any type of dealings with this case, you were safe. You were able to stay in Mound Bayou. The Clears did not come around there playing with them folks. Because not only did they have their own neighborhoods, they almost low-key had their own military. That's why you heard the man say they already knew when they came around here, we pulled the blickies, we upped the hammers, and everybody got the getting. You see what I'm saying? But just think about it. And this is where I think Black America could have done better. And this is me not giving criticism because I don't know if I could do the things that my ancestors have done. But boy, just think if all them small towns remained loyal to each other and stuck together, meaning because that Mound Bayou was only in Mississippi, but there was a Mound Bayou everywhere in Louisiana, Georgia, Texas, California, Florida. It was everywhere. New York, Illinois. There was towns all over America where Black people sought refuge. There were. Just imagine if those towns were like ports and they all were able to work together and create these military, like National Guards, for lack of a better term. Just imagine what we could have been able to do. Now, don't get me wrong. It's been a lot of military involvement with the way they've been doing us in the past. See, just like Tulsa, they'll tell you, oh, it was just some boy whistling at a white girl. No, they had actual military airplanes, fighter jets, dropping bombs overnight while people slept. Okay, so that's the type of stuff they do, and that type of stuff that we probably would have had to. I'm not gonna go there, but we probably would have had to do more than that, to combat that. But even still, you know what I mean? Like, just imagine if all those ports, if all those cities acted as ports, and some emergency happened, and somehow there was some sort of Morse code, because we created that too, some sort of Morse code or something that went out that let everybody know, okay, we needed help over here in Mound Bayou, or we need help over here in Fulton County, Georgia, or we need help over here in, you know what I mean, Natchez, Mississippi, or something like that. Or Philadelphia, it didn't matter. But then again, the way they would have had infiltration and all that stuff going on, child, you would have never knew. Now, let's get into what's going on around this time. Let's first of all get into the Jim Crow era. Let's start with Jim Crow. How old is old Jim Crow? That's the biggest question. How old is Jim Crow? Now, like I said, most people think of Jim Crow and they say, oh, that must be the civil rights movement. They think of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King is the very end of Jim Crow, actually. As a matter of fact, Jim Crow started in the late 1800s, that they call the 19th century. And for people in the back, when we be talking about centuries and stuff, we be talking about stuff like, oh, so if it's the 19th century, then you mean the 1800s. If it's the 20th century, then you mean the 1900s. If it's the 21st century, then it's 2000s, and so on and so forth. So let's understand and figure out what exactly was Jim Crow law. Now, you got to put yourself in the mind of what's happening around this time. Bam, slavery. We toward the ending of slavery. Economically, the world is going through something. What do I mean by that? We got World War II happening. We got the Civil War, not Civil War. We got World War II happening. We got the Great Depression. We got the Great Migration happening at the same time, simultaneously. We got all this mass genocide of Black America happen all over the world. Like I said, the Great Depression, World War I and II, and then the interstates are being put through Black neighborhoods to break up all this Black economy and economics, right? All this stuff is happening at the same time. So you got mass migrations of people being forced and pushed to different areas, moved from their lands, uprooted from what they own and everything they know, and pushed certain places. And the ones who stood and fight, even if they did stay, a lot of the KKK swept up a lot of that. You know what I'm saying? Mind you, Ellis Island is happening at the same time. So you got clears coming in through the boat, through New York. They all getting off the boat, bringing all that yellow fever and chicken pox and things of that nature. They coming off the boat with their diseases, coming to America, and they need a place to stay. Mind you, what America's going through too with the North and the South is, economically, the South is doing way better than the North. As a matter of fact, the people in the South are living high off the hog, whereas the people in the North, they do good, but they ain't doing nowhere near as good as the South, because the South has free labor. They have this thing called slavery. Okay, so basically you're making money hand over fist. I own the person, I own the personnel, the people who doing the job. I'm really only paying for a little bit of the stuff for product, but I'm making 1,000% profit off of everything that I'm doing because I got free labor. Or even if I don't have free labor, the way the economy works in the South is, if you at the bottom of the totem pole, you probably was a sharecropper working for your land back, which means I'm paying you pennies anyway on the dollar, which means technically you still under slavery, which means I'm still making money if I'm rich, hand over fist. Now, a lot of things is taking place also as well. A lot of us will find when we do our genealogy, especially our genealogy in the South, that we have family who fought in the Civil War. We have family who fought in World War I. We got family who fought in World War II. We got family who fought in all these wars, okay? And you're going to realize stuff like, oh, snap. I got a cousin, like for instance, I have an actual cousin who fought on the side of the Confederate. Now, the way I was taught in high school and college and middle school and elementary was that the Confederate was these racist clears and they were horrible. So then I would look at my tombstone and my cousin's gravesite and say, now what in the world would you be doing fighting on the side of the Confederate? And immediately I said, well, maybe he was a slave. Or maybe he worked for a slaver and that's why he was fighting on the side of the Confederate. That's the furthest thing from the truth. As a matter of fact, it was about economics, that war. And that war, a lot of Black people fought on both sides because it benefited them on both sides. If you were from the South and you were a business owner, or you owned land, or you owned anything, if you were doing anything independently, economically, you would probably want to favor the Confederate. Yeah, it's slavery. Yeah, it's clear people over here enslaving my people, but my bottom line speaks for itself. And honestly, I'd rather deal with these clears than them up there. I don't know what they're trying to do. Or if you were a slave, the North was losing. So they was like, yo, we need help. If y'all get free, we'll give you freedom and your family. So if you were a person who were enslaved or not even enslaved, you were on that lower economic totem pole, then you probably went and fought for the Union and or the North. Why? Because I can get free and I won't have to worry about falling under these stipulations of slavery if I go fight for the North. But people think, see, they taught us in school that the North was good, the Union was good, and the Confederate was bad. But then I learned about a place called the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is another place in Mississippi where tens of thousands of my black ancestors was left to die in a huge literal bowl. And this place was patrolled and ran by the Union Army. So even though social studies taught me in 4th grade that the Union only came to the South to fight the Confederates to free the slaves, I would then have to ask my 4th grade teacher, well, then if that's the case, ma'am, why would those same Union soldiers come down here to free slaves and then watch them die and kill them? I thought they were on our side. I thought the whole purpose of this war was for them to free me. Why would they want to fight and kill and die to free me and then watch me die right after that? It makes absolutely no sense. And these are the questions that you need to be asking yourself when you be learning about this history, or even when you're thinking about history in the past, and even what they told you, because they lie. They tell you the story how they want you to get the story. So if you can see old black footage of black people waving Confederate flags, you first have to realize that that was a black design. That belonged to black folks before the clears stole it and then renamed it, like the swastika. Hello? So you have to understand why that is happening like that. And if you were like me in the past, I would immediately ignore it and say, oh my God, my people were sellouts. They were horrible. They were slavers. They were da, da, da. But when you understand history, you understand it's way deeper than you think it is. And sometimes when it's that deep and you think it's deep, it's really not that deep. Okay? So, just out of curiosity, or just to put that out there. So I want to show you guys this as well. Y'all get the likes up. So on top of that, I want to show, hold on. Creating a black ghetto. No, here we go. Is this it? I want to also, because I want to show you guys a lot of what was happening, or a lot of the brand businesses and brand stuff that we were doing back in the day. Can y'all see this? No, let me let y'all see it. So take a look at this article. Now, this article talks about, they're going to say African Americans, whatever. But it talks about history of Black Americans, foundation of Black Americans, indigenous Indians, whatever you want to call us. But it talks about the history of our entrepreneurship in America and brands. Because, yes, we owned brands. You know how now every brand is owned by a Clear or one of those unmentionables? Back then, we owned our own brands. Yes. Like you remember, I know when I was growing up, the last Black-owned brand that I recall, or the last two, was Johnson & Johnson. That was owned by a Black man. And BET. BET was owned by Robert Johnson. Is he the same Johnson from Johnson & Johnson? Either way. But back in the days, we owned our own brands, okay? So in this article, I saw something, first of all, that I thought was interesting when I saw this flyer. Now, this is a flyer for a grand opening of Rose Meadows House of Beauty. Now, this is a Black-owned business, right? And look at how this advertisement is talking. It says, the Rose Meadows House of Beauty, open house Sunday, May 30th, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it's called the House of Beauty. And it's to Monday, May 31st, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And it says, Corner John and Mac. It says, women, this is what you've been waiting for. Everything to make you beautiful, all under one roof. Now, I'm not sure what all was popping off inside of this place of business, but if I was living in this time, I'm trying to go to the House of Beauty, because this sounds like it's lit up in here. They say it's a one-stop shop. So if I'm back then, I can go get my nails done. I can go get a facial, pedicure, hair. I can even possibly, but this is the type of stuff that we were doing. And this, mind you, this is pre-World War I. Let me give you the dates on all this, because I don't know if y'all realize World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression all happened within like a 30-year span, 40-year span. I don't know if y'all know that, right? But World War I started in July 1st of 1914. And that lasted some years. Then World War II lasted in September of started in 1937. But then the Great Depression was happening in 1929. All of this is happening around the time they're snatching our wealth. This is all happening simultaneously. And shout out to y'all putting those black brands in the chat. Remember, Ebony was a brand. Remember, Oil Sheen was a brand. Just For Me, I don't know if Just For Me was a brand, but I remember some of the perms were a brand. Y'all remember that? We had our own cocoa butter. We don't have none of that no more. Nowadays, when you see people have products, now those people products, they basically just slapping their name on stuff. But back then, we made the stuff. Like it was our stuff. Okay? So I wanted to show you this. But hold on, let me see. Starting for students. Okay, let me back up. Let me go up here and read this. All right, it says this section presents list of contemporary and historic African American entrepreneurs in the United States who have made an impact in the business world. While these lists are by no means comprehensive, they provide a good starting point for students, scholars, and independent researchers to begin researching prominent and influential Black American businessmen and businesswomen. Researchers have noticed that several historic African American entrepreneurs were heavily involved in beauty, health, and fashion, including but not limited to Auntie Malone. That's the lady who came up, who reared up Madam C.J. Walker, and they mentioned her next. Rose Meta Morgan, Anthony Orton, and many, many more. Many were also either descendants of enslaved people born into slavery and freed with the passage of the 13th Amendment. Furthermore, several contemporary African-American entrepreneurs became prominent businessmen and businesswomen only after reaching celebrity in other fields such as music, sports, and including but not limited to, now we have obviously the Jay-Z, Rihanna, Michael Jordan, and many more. So basically what they're talking about is back then we were popular and famous for running brands. We had businesses. We owned salons. We owned the chemicals that we put in our head. But now we're more popular for music and sports. Okay? So that's basically what they're saying. But I thought that this was dope to share because I feel like we need to look into what we really were doing and a lot of stuff that was happening. Because remember, I get it. Everybody can't be a business owner. I get that. I'm not slow. I understand that. However, when you can circulate your dollar back into your own pocket, that's when you create power. That's when you create an economic power. Why do you think Trump and them is proposing tariffs and all this stuff on all these other people? They have their own economic independence. The reason why they don't have to do that stuff to people in America is because we are all slaves to their economic machine. And I don't care what color or creed you are, okay? Now, I want to show y'all this. Now, we talking about small businesses, right? And take this for what it's worth, because I'm pulling this up on these people website. But this is coming from guides.loc.gov. It says small businesses. After the Civil War, African-American entrepreneurs founded businesses to serve their own communities, including barbershops, funeral homes, hotels, retail stores, restaurants, and catering businesses, newspapers, and beauty products. Small African-American businesses and their owners might not be as well known as Madam C.J. Walker and her cosmetic empire. However, their contributions to the communities cannot be overstated. Although researching smaller companies may prove more challenging, the libraries doing more company research guide may provide some helpful tips for finding out more information on them. Okay, so now I'm talking about how they're trying to look up more old businesses, small businesses, and things of that nature. Now, here's some books and biographies about some of these people. And you, as you can see, Behind the Scenes is a book. Black Titan is a book. On Her Own Ground is a book. And these are all old books. These are all old books from the olden days. You know what I mean? talking about how these people were successful entrepreneurs. Now, you got to put yourself in the mind of a Black American. You are now so-called freed, meaning status-wise you change. Citizen status-wise, now you got to change in citizen status-wise, right? So now that you're free, now you're kind of starting over. But what you're not realizing is while you're doing your little smart businesses, they're extracting wealth from you slowly but surely, and also pulling you down with Jim Crow and all this other stuff happening with Great Depression and all that stuff, and Great Migration and GI Bills and redlining and all this stuff is happening. While they're doing this, they're giving these clear folks the leg up. So businesses, Black businesses are falling. Black businesses are going away. We saw this happen a lot during Jim Crow. So when you think about, during civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, remember, John Singleton said his parents told him, hey, don't go out there messing with Martin. We could lose our farm. We could lose our business. We could lose everything we ever worked for. Don't do it. But John Singleton did it anyway. And around that time, a lot of Black businesses, Black schools, Black hospitals, Black everything, a lot of the things that we had started to close because now our money in economics was diverted to where? The clears. And this is why the civil rights movement was a setup from the beginning. It was strategically done for us to get emotionally charged by what we saw on TV. Because mind you, around this time, remember, around the time that the civil rights movement and Mike and all them folks is getting bit by dogs, guess what else is happening? Who can guess? What else is happening across America around the time Mike and them getting hit with water hoses and bit by dogs, and they singing together and getting arrested and popped upside the head? Do you want to know what else is happening at this time? America's buying TVs because we got to be able to see it to know that it's happening. So now America's buying televisions, and more we plastered all over America, Black people being towed down to the floor down, marching for civil rights and equal rights, as they should. But it was blown out of proportion so that they can siphon our economic power away and turn us into economic slaves. But we were very successful during the time. We just didn't realize we were going through an okie doke. We were literally taking off our rocker by following the way we felt. Our emotions took us off. Our emotions was the straw to break the camel's back to get us to make them to be their economic slaves. And that's that whole Martin Luther King era civil rights movement. Okay? And I want y'all to really understand what that means. Really and truly understand what that means. Now, let me go with, hold on one second. Now I want to go to, now remember, I told y'all, wait, I don't want to go there yet. Let's go back a little bit further. Let's go back. Okay, let's go back to what was happening in the United States before World War I. So what was going on in the U.S. before World War I? World War I, mind you, I said started what, July 1914? What was going on in America during this time? Prior to World War I, it says the United States before World War I was an economic superpower rivaling the much older empire nations of Europe. Now let me tell you how dope these clears who came to America had it. Now, yeah, Europe had their empires. Rome had an empire. They had their bags. They had their big ones. They did their big ones. But around this time, this is a new world. We got free work, free labor, and we taking over all these institutions. We getting free ideas to jack and put our names on, free patents, free everything. If you are clear and you are coming to the new world, aka America, in this time, you lived high off the hog. If you came to America and didn't live high off the hog, it just wasn't in the cards for you, fat. You should have died and came back. I'm just telling you now, you just came back at the wrong time. So if you're clear coming to America, everything is literally handed to you and sat in your lap. And you are doing better than everybody else all across the European nations, which is where you come from, because they still under the same regimes and powers that they've been battling and deal with this whole time. But you have the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. You can say, I come to America and I want to live near the mountains. You can pack up your family and your things and hitchhike a horse all the way to Colorado and stake your claim there and have free land grant colleges. Remember all the things Martin Luther King said they were giving out? And you get to have an economic and socio-economic status that puts you amongst the indigenous population. And that means you can do whatever it is you want with no consequences. You was lit if you were clear coming to America during this time. It says the 1800s had been a period of division and conflict for the United States. Why? Because the Indians were having a lot of wars. They don't tell you about that. The blacks / Indians were fighting wars out their ass, 90 going west. So it says that, but also one of the industrialization expansions in prosperity. It says American economic growth in the second half of the century was the fastest in its history, producing rapid rises in productions, wages, and personal wealth. The opportunities available in America fed a resurgence of immigrations in the late 1800s. Millions crossed the seas from Europe and Asia. Now look. Pay attention. Millions crossing the seas from Europe and Asia. This is where a lot of your $5 footlong ancestors coming in too. Don't forget that. It ain't just the clears coming in. All those mestizos, all them Mexicans that you see today that say they the original Mayans and Aztec people, you know, the representatives, all the clears, all these folks coming in. Yeah, that's them. Siberians. Yes, that's them. This way your Native American and your $5 footlongs coming in. So it says millions crossed the seas from Europe and Asia seeking work opportunities as well as political and religious freedoms. It says industrial growth also transformed American society. New transport infrastructure made travel and relocation easier. In some American cities, particularly New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia, swelled with newcomers. So that means a lot of the people were coming into New York, Chicago, and Philly. It says industrial power was matched with military power, heralding the beginning of an American imperialism. So now we're coming into the industrialism area. Now, what is the industrialism area? Now we're talking about big plants. Now we're talking about mass manufacturing. So cars, we talking about if we making microwaves. I'm just saying stuff that mass manufactured and mass distributing. That's where America is going. Mind you, a black man just created the what? The cotton gin. This adds to industrialism. So even though the clears were trying to flip the way that the economy was going, we were still keeping up. Okay? We were still creating machines and everything. We were still creating cars. They created their cars after us. Okay? So, now, it says all of this has seemed impossible in the middle of the century when the United States was divided and devastated by a bloody civil war, which was between 1861 and 1865. It began with 11 southern states seceding or withdrawing from the United States, chiefly over disputes about states' rights and the federal government's authority to limit the spread of slavery. Now, this is what history tells us. They like to hone in and say this was all about slavery, and that's why they was fighting. And so this is why the 11 states in the South wanted to secede from America, because they wanted to keep their slaves. And while that is true, that is not exactly why this happened. This happened because not only did the South have their slaves, economically, people in the South, by and large, did better than people in the North. They were able to make money hand over fist. We getting free to cheap labor down here. Nigga, it's lit. And not just black people were doing the laboring. Clear people did the laboring. Asians did the laboring. Mestizos, a lot of other people did the laboring as well. So it wasn't just us. It was a majority of us, but it wasn't just us, okay? It's no different. If you want to see what it felt like, it's no different than Mr. McDonald on how many McDonald's restaurants and how many people do he employ. I'm pretty sure compared to how much money he makes, he's not paying them the correct wage. So by that logic, whoever owns McDonald's, the brand as a whole, they own a lot of slaves. A lot. Because even if you're working for little to no money, that's still a slave wage. And that could be for any company you're dealing with. So that's just how it was back then. That's how the people back then looked at it. You got, in order to have a capitalist society, you got to have poor people to step on. Welcome to the party, you're late. Okay? So it goes on to say, now the 11 states wanted to secede from the United States, and they're trying to say it's due to slavery. It says the 11 dissident states formed the Confederate States of America, while the newly elected president, Abraham Lincoln, committed to maintaining the Union through the use of military force. Its larger population and industrial base meant the northeastern states of the Unions were better equipped for war than the Confederacy. Nevertheless, the American Civil War lasted for 4 painful years and resulted in more than 600,000 deaths. It goes on to say the decade following became known as Reconstruction, as the nation struggled to heal the wounds of the war and reintegrate the former Confederate states into the Union. Slavery was formally abolished nationwide, though assimilating more than 3 million former slaves into American society created its own problems. Some of the more detrimental outcomes were the emergence of racist groups like the KKK and the formation of Jim Crow laws to segregate and marginalize African Americans. Now let's put our thinking caps on. If all of these black folks, most of us were slaves and we were free, now we wandering. We just wandering around. Oh Lord, what we gonna do? How's I gonna work? How's I gonna eat? Where's I gonna go? Now I got these skills, but yet and still I'm a slave. And the clears, they don't want to really rock with me because I'm a slave, okay? And even if they hired me, they definitely pay me pennies on a dollar because why? I'm a slave, okay? Now they never take into account the black people who were in the South that were not slaves, who were able to walk around. And there were 2 categories of those people. There were freemen and there were freed men. Now this is all over America, not just the South. Freemen are people who never had any type of bondage or slavery. Freedmen, Freedmen's Bank, Freedmen's Bureau, freedmen, those are people who were under said contracts or slavery, okay? So those are 2 different group of free black people that's just walking around chilling while we all supposed to be slaves. Mind you, this is how you get these quote unquote stories of Frederick Douglass being able to be born to a slave mama, but make it through the ills and wheels of slavery after he beat up the slave master and all that craziness. Y'all remember all of that, okay? So this is all happening in this time frame, but they want us to believe that we were supposed to just be wandering around aimlessly trying to figure it out, but somehow simultaneously still being successful. We were probably successful because we were successful before all of this even took place. Has anybody thought about that? The reason we were able to become the first black this or the first black that or the first billionaire or the first Mound Bayou or the first Tulsa or the first, because we were already doing it. Not because some miracle fell out of the sky, white Jesus Christ came back on a bike for 2 seconds just to give us a leg up. Maybe we were already doing it. Just an observation, just, who knows? Who knows? But I wanted to share that with y'all. Now, I want to go here right quick. Now, I want to go into African Americans, and I hate using that term, but just for, terms and purposes of the articles, we're going to go with this. African Americans in the 20th century. Now, remember, the 20th century is the 1900s. Now we're fast forwarding to the 1900s. It says the 19th century, that's the 1800s, was a time of radical transformation in the political and legal status of African Americans. Remember also in the 1800s, what else was happening in the South in the 1800s? We held positions of power in politics. Remember, we were the Republicans in the South in the 1800s as well. So what they're talking about is how things were shifting from that to what we have now. It says blacks were free from slavery and began to enjoy greater rights as citizens, though full recognition of their rights remained a long way off. Despite these dramatic developments, many economic and demographic characteristics of African Americans at the end of the 19th century were not that different from what they had been in the mid 1800s. So they saying when they looked up by the late 1800s, the black people were the same as they were by the mid 1800s. In the mid 1800s, it says tables 1 and 2 present characteristics of black and white Americans in 1900. As recorded in the census for that year, the 1900 census did not record information on the years of schooling or income, so these important variables are left out of these tables. Do you want to know why those variables are left out? Because right now, they're just implementing this education system thing in. They're just putting it in. All of this is happening at the same time. So it didn't matter what your education status was. They're just now making this education thing a federal situation. Meaning, right now, it's not mandatory in this time for your children to go to school. But by the early to mid 1900s, it's now going to be mandatory that your child become educated in the education system. So they're not asking these people who's successful what the education background was, because most people weren't educated. Because the most educated people weren't the most successful. The business owners were. Okay? So now back to what this was saying. So it's saying that according to the census, 90% of African Americans still lived in southern U.S. in 1900s. Now they're going off the census. Now remember, the census is inaccurate, and let me tell you why. Because there's no way that they can count all them people. Even today, they can't count all them people. But imagine back then. At least now, most people create most people create social media accounts, so you can kind of count there. But back then, there was no way they can account for who was doing what. So these are all guesstimations. So according to the census, 90% of African Americans still lived in the southern U.S. in 1900. Roughly the same percentage as lived in the South in 1870. We're getting into paper genocide here. 3/4 of black households were located in rural places. Now, remember we talk about gentrification? Gentrification is something that happens every 50 to 100 years. Basically, the blacks move into the city and the clears move out, and then the vice versa happens. That's what's shape-shifting now. Right now, the clears are moving back into the city and they pushing the Negroes out to the outskirts. So if you look back in the 1800s, we were already there where they pushing us now. Think about all your major cities. They pushing most of the black people to the outskirts. Those are rural areas. So in the 1800s, we were already in the rural areas until gentrification, and then we flipped. That's what they doing. Same thing happening today. So 90% was living in the South. And it's the same about living in the South in 1870. 3/4 of black households were located in rural places. We already talked about that. Only about 1/5 of African American household head owners own their homes. Less than half the percentage amongst the whites. Now, this is where I say paper genocide comes in. And let me tell you why I say this. First of all, we got to look at what black Americans were doing. We were more communal back then. Now we're more not economically independent. We're more independent, meaning 18, get your ass about this house. Even though we were like that back then, typically grandmothers still house her son and daughters and grandkids and things of that nature. Everybody was still living under, we were more communal then than we are now. I'll say that as far as staying and living amongst family. So in this time, according to the census, this is when what they write on paper becomes reality, because it's not real in real time. It's just what they wrote. According to the census, they are trying to say that black Americans owned way less households or own less homes than clear Americans. But we know that to not be necessarily true, because during this time, they're still pouring in from Ellis Island. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, they are getting housing allowances, just like the people coming in today. Remember, we saw them getting the food stamps and they giving them free rent and free house. They were getting that as well. So don't get me wrong. And yes, the tables are turning. Yes, the white wealth gap is raising and the black one is lowering slowly, but yet and still, but it's only because they're getting all these provisions that Martin Luther King told us about. But for the most part, the census is basically saying it is what it is without it absolutely being that, because they know that that's the trajectory in which things will be. So they got us looking like we were just poor, destitute in the South and not able to make it. And don't get me wrong, like I said at the beginning of the video, there were some black people in the South that suffered under that type of economic stress, but that just wasn't the case for everybody. All of our ancestors were not slaves. But this is what happens when we rely on them for everything. If we listen to their numbers and his story, then we'll always get their story and we'll never get the truth. But think about it as well, too. We would own large properties of land and we might have, you feel what I'm saying, one house on it, but then other shacks or other little small houses with other family. But none of that's taken into account. It's all just made to look like, and let me pull up the chart. It's all basically made to look like Black Americans were doing bad and the clears were doing better. Then they bring up the school thing as if being not going to school was a bad thing when nobody was really going to school back then. For the most part, most people, black or white, wasn't going to school. It says about half of black men and about 35% of black women who reported an occupation to the census, now these are only the ones who reported, said that they worked as a farmer or a farm laborer, as opposed to about 1/3 of white men and about 8% of white women. It says outside of farm work, African-American men and women were greatly concentrated as in unskilled labor and service jobs. Most black children did not attend school in the year before the census, and white children were much more likely to have attended. So the members of a typical African-American family at the start of the 20th century lived and worked on a farm in the South and did not own their home. Children in these families were unlikely to be in school, even at very young ages. Now, you got to watch the hijack. Now, again, they putting the school factor in because now it's a factor. Back then, it wasn't. But let's just talk turkey. At the end of the day, numbers can lie, because what they're making it seem like black Americans economically was just doing that bad and whites were doing that well. And that's just not the case. As a matter of fact, a lot of white Americans, and I can pull it up, but a lot of white Americans were doing extremely poor. Let's go get it. Hold on. But it's all about how you write the history. It's all about how you write the history. Hold on. No, not that. Let me see. I want to show y'all these clips. I might could find it. Hold on. I might could find it in my emails. There's a clip that I need y'all to see. So basically, it's this clip. And in this clip, these clear people are so poor. OMG, they are so poor. And it's not even the fact that they so poor. It's the fact that you've never seen any sort of show or anything that show you this side of clear people and how bad they were doing. Is this it? Is this it? Let me back up. Y'all bear with me. Please and thank you, bear with me. It was called, what was the name of that video? It was called it was something about freak. Hold on. Let me look at it. Let me look it up like this. Hold on, I'm gonna show y'all something because I need y'all to see this. It was about, because they were calling black people who were going from city to city, different cities, they were calling them refugees. Hold on. They were calling the black people that were coming from different city to different city. They were saying that basically that they were refugees. And a lot of that was talked about also in the 14th Amendment when they talk about refugees. A lot of people don't understand. This is why I say all the time words are powerful. Because while they sitting up there acting like oh, refugees mean these people that's coming from overseas. No, refugees just meant anybody. Remember the last time they used the word, refugees meant people in America who could be displaced off their land. Katrina was a place where they called us refugees. But now they've got it making it seem like it means anybody coming from anywhere. When they talked about the freedoms and liberties of these so-called refugees. Okay? Where's that damn? Let me show y'all something. It was so basically it was a, let me see. And you should have seen them. Oh, they was poor, broken, destitute. I don't know why. Hold on, let me fast forward. Because there's a poor class of blacks, poor class of whites, poor class of everybody. Don't ever let them mess you up and make you believe that it's only one-sided. Hold on, because they always only show the poor blacks. They don't hardly ever want to show us the poor whites doing how bad they was doing. No, this one ain't showing it. And when you even pull it up, it's hard to show it to you. They don't even want to show you. Damn it, what's the name of that damn video that I had where they were talking about let me see. This might be one. Let's see what this man's saying. Y'all get the likes up on the video.
1877, most white Southerners heaved a sigh of relief. They believed that the economic situation would improve once the Army left. They were sorely mistaken.
Well, of course, poor whites were devastated by the war like anyone else. Much of their land had been marched over and destroyed, tools, crops, animals, bridges. You know, many were thrown into poverty by the war. There's a high death rate, of course, in the Confederate Army.
Northern businessmen looked to the devastated South and saw opportunity. Land was cheap, and factories quickly turned Southern resources, like cotton, into profit. But the profits went north, leaving the South in a state of poverty.
Poor whites were in a dire position, just like former slaves, you know, and they had to try to get back on their feet. Many of them still owned their land, but land is not the only thing you need. You need tools, you need seed, fertilizer, etc. And so what they did was borrow money in order to get farming again.
Local merchants and planters lent money to these poor white farmers in exchange for a percentage of their incoming crops.
And unfortunately, in the chaotic conditions of the South, the crops failed, it was very hard to market them, and so many poor whites fall further and further into debt after the war because of this situation in the South in the post-war period.
Burdened by debt and overcome by their resentment of landowners' power, poor whites became angrier and angrier. Their frustration fueled intense racism as they sought to elevate their own lowly status by degrading their black peers.
Now you see, a big reason why the KKK was so big and so wonderful, so big and so successful was because they were jealous of the fact that there were black people who did extremely well, way better than them. So a lot of the vigor and rage and all that stuff was them being jealous, wanting those lives. Okay? So that's why you got your KKK going into Tulsa and all these other places taking over this land, because how dare these niggas live better than us?
By the 1890s, the rage and indignation of poor whites would also inspire political revolt against the wealthy.
You heard that? It said by the 1890s that the whites got so upset that they were poor that basically they were getting ready to go against the powers that be. Like, yo, we got to fight this politically. What's up? Because they did not like the fact that they were doing as bad as they were and we weren't. Mind you, remember, when they come to America, they are told that they are better than us. They are put at a higher economic status than us. Remember that. They are here and we supposed to be here. So imagine you come to a country and they telling you you're up here and the black Negroes are here. But you go around here and you realize I'm poor, but these Negroes who supposed to be under me got way more than me. That caused a lot of division and racism too. Take a look at this video. Let me give y'all a look into the poor whites back then. Now these look Hispanic. Yeah, these Hispanic. These look like they're in New York. Now this is the 1900s. Mind you, this is in the 1900s. So this is talking about the 1967 welfare revolt. This is what the economy looked like for all people who lived in the poor socioeconomic status. Not just blacks, not just whites. If you were poor, you too were destitute and left to be under this demise as well.
My check on time. Now they say they put them out, but now like yesterday, it's supposed to have been here yesterday, and it didn't arrive, and I'm waiting today for it. Now, 2 weeks ago, it was supposed to have been on a Friday, so it didn't arrive. So I waited Saturday until the mailman went by, still no check. So I called down there for an emergency order like they told me to. There is no such thing as emergency order on a weekend. So in other words, my children went without food from Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, until Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Mrs. Jane Wilson is a Detroit welfare mother.
Pause before we get into Miss Jane. Now, mind you, remember, most of your KKK members, most of your people who are doing this stuff are poor people. People with money, yeah, they might be leading the charge, but they ain't got time. Bitch, I got money. You know what I'm saying? I'm traveling, chilling, rubbing shoulders, whoop-de-whoop. But the poor whites, they don't have nothing but time on their hands to rub hands like Birdman and say, we going to get these niggers, because they are not living the way that it was advertised to them when they came over here. Remember, the influx of people to the new world was because you were supposed to come here and have your religious freedoms. That's what they like to say. But really, economically, you're supposed to do the best you've ever done anywhere. Better than you doing at home. You're supposed to be economically way better off. But a lot of the clears, because remember, they getting tricked just like us. They told that your skin color is currency when it's really not. It's only currency when they dealing with us at this level. But they tell them their skin color is currency. But the fact of the matter is, most of these welfare programs, most of these programs that we take a part of or take advantage of now were literally created to give the clears, white people, an economic leg up over Black America. The project housing, the food stamps, the GI Bill, all of this is welfare to push them up while they slowly but surely through the Great Migration, Great Depression, all these other world wars and all these different things, the KKK, but while they lift them up like this, they slowly but surely pushing us down one by one. Almost like it was so smooth, if it was a snake, it would have bit us. That's how slow and calculated it was. By the time we looked up, and I'm going to tell you when we looked up, we just looked up in the last 10 years. By the time we looked up, which was the last 10 years, remember the closing of Jim Crow was Martin Luther King in the March on Washington. That was the closing of the Jim Crow era. We just now looking up 10 years ago, and I'm giving myself 10 years, but as a collective, I'll say we just now realizing, oh shit, we got played. Oh shit. Mike really did walk us into a burning bush. Oh shit, Malcolm was right. Oh, we just now figuring it out, but it's too late. And that's the game that these people been able to play on us. This is one part of it, but that's the game. But what they don't show you, because remember, if you make them believe it, then so it is so. So if you make them believe that they're poor and they're slaves and they come from Africa, then that's just what it's going to be. So they never show you images like this, because if they show you images like this, then they'd have to admit that, And technically, they weren't as bad off as we say they were, because the clears were just as bad. If they come out and say that all these things that we shame y'all for taking advantage of was really created to give them a leg up economically over you, if they say that, then they have to admit that they sabotaged us, and they never want to do that. But let's get back to this lady, Miss Jane.
The premise of the ADC program is simple, that children without visible means of support must be aided by the state. But to be eligible, a mother and her children must be without a man in the house.
Well, my husband left me in September, and then I went down to the emergency shelter, welfare shelter, and then I had to go through the welfare, fill out all these papers, drag all 5 kids on the bus, go down there, sit there and wait for 3-4 hours until they come around to you. I felt like the lowest thing on earth when I went to the welfare. I felt like they were all better than me, that they could walk all over me, which I got down on my hands and knees to them and begged them for coats and boots for these children at wintertime. I actually got down on my hands and knees, and you can ask anybody down at that office. I actually got down on my hands and knees and begged them. And you know what? And when I went down there, sure, they gave me the coats and boots. Sure, after you get down in your...
Y'all see that little black girl? Now, this is telling me that whatever neighborhood she live in, she live amongst the Negroes. So, now this is a northern area, right? And I can tell. I forgot. I think he said Detroit. I can't remember. Don't get me the line. But this tells me that this poor clear woman who got clear babies, so she's not one of those clear women who act like niggas, but this poor clear woman was living amongst the Negroes. But remember, in order to keep us separate and keep us from understanding that we're beneath the clear people, we got to separate them. So this is, remember, a lot of this separation is happening within the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Now they're dividing. They're taking the clear people out the projects, giving those people housing allowances, aka GI bills, aka home loans, aka all easy ways to go grab houses. And they taking us out of our homes and they putting us into the projects. So they either moving us forcefully through the Great Migration, or they taking us out of our homes, stealing our land through eminent domain, through the KKK, however they can, and whoever's left, they're putting us in project houses. But the clears are still poor. They just not advertising it to us. Every time we turn on the TV, we see our reflection as being poor. They not showing us that nothing is happening and changing in a positive way for the clears in this economic situation either.
Hands and knees and you beg. That's the only way you're going to get anything from the welfare. And to this day, I have never gotten anything from the welfare for myself.
Breakfast.
Now they're going to flip it back to the black children, right? Of course, as they always do. But I'm using this to show you how this economic situation, and this is why they feared, this is one of the reasons why they feared Fred Hampton, because he was able to crack this code and get other people to see it. And that's why he was able to say, hey, KKK, I can't stand you crackers and hunkies or whatever he called them. I can't stand y'all and y'all can't stand me either. But if we stand together for this economic right shit, then we could really make a wave. And they put their differences aside and was getting ready to stand together. That's one of the main reasons why they got rid of my boy, Fred Hampton. He was able to crack that code, but not only crack the code, he was able to get other people to see that they can crack that code as well and see that basically they the enemy against us all. Because that's just what it really is, to be completely honest. But again, it's about what you can mentally get a person to believe, and that becomes its reality.
These second generations of welfare is coming up, and one of the things I think is more crucial to is the youth that's in the ghetto, because most of the youth that's coming up, you know, they're ashamed to tell their buddies, you know, say, well, yeah, we on welfare, you know, we getting ADC or food stamps and things like this here.
Everybody in my whole neighborhood was on relief. We used to run around and kid about it. Because everybody in my neighborhood was on relief, but I was ashamed to go out my neighborhood and tell somebody I was on ADC. Yeah, ashamed of it.
If a child does not have adequate clothing, they don't want to go. If they can't participate and go to the football games and to the movies, they don't want to go to school. So it starts when a child is small. They recognize the fact that they don't have the things that other children have. Children realize when they're different. They know, I don't care how small you are, you know when you're different. And not only that, when you go to the public schools, many times the teachers make you know that you're different.
Really quickly, you know, I be trying to understand how it feels to be raised amongst a different group of people and like crap. I'm sorry, I just dropped this cup and be around them 24/7. Shit. Let me play some more of this video. Let me pick this up, y'all. I'm sorry, I just wasted this cup. Damn it. I'm gonna play some more of the video and I'm gonna come right back, y'all. Y'all get the likes up on the video. My bad.
Welfare children don't have, I was not able to buy, you know, white shirts for ties and things. If a mother go out like I do, I buy my child these knit sweaters and bandana sweaters and things like that. And he wear them with his pants. But Friday, he got to wear a shirt and a tie. And I just don't have it. They have sent my child home twice, you know, last year for not being dressed in a tie. And I mean, it made me real mad. And I called the principal and told him, you know, I said, look, my child ain't got no shirt and ties. Now, if you want to have one, you buy him one.
Even in school, constant and subtle discriminations are made between welfare children and other youngsters. To qualify for most free services, such as milk, a pupil must be on welfare, and thus declares himself a welfare child.
The teacher would tell everybody, the kids, about him being on welfare, and he didn't want them to know he was on welfare. That lunch card they give him, it's only a special lunch that he get for welfare children, and it's not enough. They don't get no kind of.
And just to kind of add a bit of a context to this, y'all, this is what happens after the 1800s. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm cleaning up and talking to y'all, but listen, this is what's all happening in the after the 1800s, after we've taken, and I didn't mean to go to this far, but since we're here, we're just going to talk about it. But this is the aftermath of Jim Crow in the 1900s, in the late 1960s, or the 50s, late 60s. This is the aftermath of Jim Crow. So not only are poor whites still whites, poor blacks are still poor as well. And on top of this, economically, we don't have any independence because now we're beholden to this system. We got to work their jobs. We got to work up under them like crazy. It's ridiculous. Now, I'm using this really quickly to give you some commentary, and I'm going to let y'all watch it, and I'm almost done. Sorry, y'all.
Dessert with it, or ice cream, and I always have to give him more money to go with it.
They ain't going to give but a handful of crumbs to a mother. What do you think the young teenager gonna do? You know, why do you think that's down here on Huff? You know, because when it gets dark, they have to go out here and survive.
I mean, what's the sense of marrying somebody if he can't support you? That's his job to support you and the baby, not my job to support him and the baby. So after he started working, work more than he been working, then I marry him. And I think he's able to take care of two.
And many hills? Not necessarily.
Many of the girls who go on welfare never graduate from high school. A girl who gets pregnant in most high schools is automatically expelled. Usually she doesn't come back. She's on her way to a lifetime.
Sorry, y'all. I let it play too long. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. This is a good documentary that we can go over. I'm sorry, you guys. Sorry about that. I had to make sure I cleaned up that mess that I made. I apologize. But where was I? So what I was saying was basically, this is how we end up in the situation that we're in. And us coming out of this Jim Crow era from Martin Luther King and from all of this stuff is basically putting us in the position that we're in now where we're economic slaves. Now I want to move on because this is not where I was going with this lesson, but things kind of just, things just happened. Okay. Now I want to move on. I want to move to, hold on 1 second. Let me go back. All right. Now let's talk about the Great Depression. Now we spoke about a few things. Sorry. I want to talk about the Great Depression. Now the Great Depression is the financial reset that America basically had. And a lot of Black Americans during this time, during the Great Depression, a lot of these Black Americans, mind you, during the Great Depression, they're extracting this wealth from us, closing down businesses and things of that nature. We losing homes, we losing land, we losing all types of stuff. But in order to stay afloat, we got to work. So a lot of us are doing, secondary jobs or doing jobs such as housekeeping, things of that nature. And I wanted to show y'all this video of what African Americans or so-called African Americans, what Black Americans were going through around the time during the Great Depression, right? And what kind of work was happening. But remember, this work is only happening like this because now they have taken us they're taking us, and now it's almost done, but they've taken us out of our economic independence really quickly.
Downturns in the industrialized world. While no group escaped the economic devastation of the Great Depression, few suffered more than African Americans. African Americans across the country already occupied a fragile position within the economy. By the late 20s, many African Americans toiled away in domestic service jobs, farmers, and as service workers marked by low wages, weak job security, and questionable labor conditions. Approximately 11 million African Americans in the South were principally used as sharecroppers, tenant farmers, and wage workers. Only 10% of those Black Southerners actually owned land. Most cultivated crops on white-owned land and received a small share of the harvest. Most Black Southerners were locked into this endless cycle of exploitation, malnutrition, disenfranchisement, and violence, especially the dangers of lynching and sexual assault. Welcome to One Mic. I'm your host, Country Boy, and as you might...
Shout out to One Mic. Remember, this is all in the time in which we're losing our economic power.
No, this episode is about African Americans and the Great Depression. As usual, if you like this, please consider donating to our Patreon page or Buy Me Coffee. You can find a link down in the description below. Also, you can find my older episodes on onemichistory.com, and please remember to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Without further ado, let's get started. In October 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed. During a period of 10 weeks, stocks on the New York Stock Exchange lost more than 50% of their value. The national income fell from 81 billion in 1929 to just 40 billion in 1932. Americans would begin to lose faith in banks, and the panic would deepen their despair. And as banks fail, businesses close and unemployment rose dramatically. The life savings of many Americans was lost, leaving Americans destitute with no job and no savings. And thousands of Americans lost their homes. The poor congregated in shacks on the edge of cities across the nation.
Let me pause right quick. You ever wonder, whenever you look up photos of the Great Depression, you'll always see more clear people than black people in those Great Depression photos. And the reason is because of this. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. And the reason is because of this. You got to keep in mind, there are two systems, economic systems going on at this time. You got the American system, which a lot of people falling under, a lot of the foreigners are falling under. And then there's our own economic system, meaning if I'm working at the grocery store, it's a black man who owns it. If I work at the hospital, it's a black man who owns it. If I work at the hotel, it's a black woman who owned the hotel. So when the American system failed, it did not affect black Americans who lived under their own economic system, for the most part, as bad as it did the other American or the white American. The reason why you always see photos of them drunk, laid out on the corner with nothing to look forward to, is because without the system, they were destitute. Mind you, while some of us, yes, did work in that system, and yes, we were some of those folks who, we were some of the people who were affected by it. For the most part, a lot of us weren't affected as bad as they were because they directly lived and breathed under the system that went bankrupt, or at least went belly up in the stocks or whatever, if that's the correct word.
Hundreds of thousands of unemployed roam the country on foot or by boxcar in a futile search for jobs. The Great Depression triggered immediate suffering in black communities. But the early days, many African Americans felt as though the Depression was a white problem and that they would finally know what it was like to struggle as they did. Economic conditions.
So then that goes to show you that even then, black Americans knew that they weren't affected the way that white Americans were affected. That's why they say that's a white problem. During this Great Depression, you got black folk saying that's white people problems. That ain't got nothing to do with us. The only other black people who commented on it were poor blacks, because under every system, you got to have rich and you got to have poor. So the only other black people who commented on it were poor blacks who were saying, good. Now they'll see how it feels to be poor, because even under our own system, you got to have rich and you got to have poor. So the poor blacks were anxious to see how the white folks were going to take being poor. It's the same thing if something happened today. If something were to happen to something in America today, black poor people would feel it worse than rich poor people. So black poor people, or even if we had separate economies, and rich poor people, black rich people went through this depression, or we went through some sort of depression, the black poor people would feel it worse than the black rich people. But the black poor people will still say, well, good. Now these white folks going through their own economic depression, they can see what it feels like to be poor. So that's what is happening here. It's just kind of a mockery, like, good. Now you'll see what it feels like. But as it stands, they said this is a white problem. This ain't got nothing to do with us.
In the South were already poor in the early 20s, but the Great Depression marked a new low. The demand for cotton and sugar fell with the economy, and as farmers grew more crops, the supply increased and the prices plummeted. Between 1929 and 1933, the price of cotton dropped from 18 cents to just 6 cents, which was exacerbated Black Southerners' already precarious situation in the economy. With the decline of cotton prices, the number of black sharecroppers fell, and in northern cities where 1.6 million African Americans escaped to during the Great Migration, black unemployment reached as high as 50%. The numbers climbed to 60% for workers in Philadelphia and Detroit.
But
The
see,
Great
those
Depression.
numbers are skewed. And this is why you got to know what you're listening to. So what they're saying is the black unemployment rate skyrocketing during the Great Migration. Well, duh. If you got hundreds of thousands, or according to them, millions of people going from Mississippi or Texas or wherever to Philly or California or wherever they're going, guess what's going to happen? When they get there, they're going to be unemployed. So while the numbers are going to show that black unemployment was this high, in which it was, it's still not going to paint an accurate picture, because yes, it's high like that because they just got here. When you got a whole mass group of people coming into one place, of course unemployment is going to be high. But yet that had nothing to do with the Depression. It was unemployment, high unemployment, because you just got there. You got to find a job. And it took some people longer than others to find jobs. But even still, it was due to relocation, the reason why the blacks weren't getting these jobs and having this high unemployment rate, not the Great Depression. But that's how you can see numbers lie, though.
Initially slowed the pace of the Great Migration, but African Americans would continue to stream out of the South even into the 30s. African Americans lost their jobs in parts of the economy where they had finally gained a major foothold. In 1929, occupations such as garbage collections, working in foundries, or domestic service were seen as Negro work, and hence lacked white competition. As desperation set in white America, not only did they have increased competition for these jobs, but they started to use old tactics of terror and intimidation to convince employers to fire the black workers. Domestic service and laundry work was especially hard hit because few families could afford domestic help, and with many impoverished women coming into the cities, families that did have money found they could employ impoverished, destitute women for almost nothing.
See? Let's call a thing, and let's really tell the truth. So I know a big misconception is a large majority of the white people had midwives, and not midwives, or black women attend to their children and tend to the house. That wasn't the case. If you were doing middle class or you were well off to do, then yes, you probably had somebody who came in and helped. But depending on how much money you made and how well off you and your family was how often and how well off and how many black people worked in those industries. Now, while I will be honest and say black people did work, and my grandmother actually was a maid for a rich couple in New Orleans for years and years and years. So that is real work. They make it seem like it was the norm for most black women to be doing that work, and that just wasn't the case. While a lot of black women did do it, it just wasn't the case, because just like everybody wasn't rich on the black side, everybody wasn't rich on the white side neither. So the black people who lost their jobs as housekeepers or farm hands or anything working for the clear people, they work for rich clear people who lost their jobs working through these big companies. It's no different if you work for Amazon right now and Amazon goes out of business. If Amazon lose money, you lose money. But if you own your own business and Amazon goes out of business, it don't affect you because you work for yourself. So that's what's happening around this time.
It's like pooling together resources and working together to help survive the downturn. For example, women and their families lived in crowded tenements in which they shared bathrooms and other facilities, including hot plates, stoves, and sinks. They bartered and exchanged goods and services because money was so tight. By 1933, Even mutual aid strategies were strained to the breaking point. Before Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, private charities and sometimes state and local governments were responsible for providing aid to economic hardships. But even in good times, these institutions provided very little for all those that needed help, and African Americans had a much harder time getting aid than white Americans, and when they were given aid, they was given much less. The Depression made it almost impossible for the nation's charitable organizations to meet the need for more than a small portion of the hungry and unemployed. Also, state and local governments could not or would not be able to provide unemployment insurance or increase welfare benefits to ease the suffering of the most vulnerable during this disaster. Despite the economic disaster and the need to alleviate pressure amongst the most vulnerable citizens, President Herbert Hoover hesitated to respond. Steeped in free market ideology at the time, he believed that government should do little to interfere with the workings of the economy. He suggested that local governments and charities should address the need of the unemployed homeless masses. Hoover was a man trapped in his own ideologies, and he watched as Americans began to settle in what they called Hoovervilles, which were a cluster of shacks made of tin, cardboard, and burlap that resided next to railroad tracks or dumps. He still refused to allow the federal government to provide direct relief, and Hoover also attempted to create an all-white Republican Party in the South by cultivating white Southerners in an attempt to appoint Judge John Park of North Carolina, who was a separatist, to the Supreme Court. For decades, the Nationalist Republican Party had treated black voters with contempt and often declined to reward their patronage. These policies looked far worse during the Great Depression, with the added suffering of African Americans. So in 19...
Pause. All right, so you see J. Edgar Hoover and his input on it. Of course, he basically wanted everything out. Like, he had this thing. He hated black Americans, even though he is one ish genetically. You know what I mean? Because legend has it he really an octoroon or something like that. But either way, he put his part in. All of this is happening. This is all siphoning the wealth and the economic independence away from us. Basically, what J. Edgar Hoover is doing is making it so that we don't have no political power, no anything in the Republican Party. He's pulling us out and making sure these clear people, mind you, he's the right-hand man to the president. They best friends. So he got pulled. So now he's pulling these black people out, siphoning the wealth slowly from black people, siphoning the power and all this stuff from black people, and literally strategically placing these white people in our place. That's one way.
1932, voters elected New York Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt to the presidency. Roosevelt won in a lopsided victory over Herbert Hoover, demonstrating the country's loss in faith in Republican Party and their economic philosophy. The new president appealed to the Democratic Party base of Southern whites, but he also grouped together Western farmers, industrial workers, white ethnic groups in northern cities, and for the first time, African Americans voted for Democrats. Still, many African Americans clung to the Republican banner, but after Roosevelt was elected, he attempted to counter the Depression by inaugurating a multitude of social programs collectively known as the New Deal. That would shift the allegiance of African Americans and result in a new political order in America.
Are y'all tracking what just happened here? Now they're siphoning our political power. So basically, here comes Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now we had them dealt with Hoover and the prior president, and we were Republican. But basically, in comes Franklin D. Roosevelt. He's supposed to be the white man who's supposed to be doing good by everybody, mostly by white Americans. However, he received favor from black Americans as well. They vote him in, and now he's literally taking their Republican power away from them, turning them into Democrats. All right, turning them into Democrats, pulling our economic and social and political power, we're all being pulled in the way in which they want us to go. Okay?
Through Rula, it's easier to connect.
Sorry.
To pass his New Deal, Roosevelt pressed Congress for an infusion of bold new economic initiatives. Met with very little resistance, Congress passed the president's complex laws to overhaul the nation's financial, agricultural, and industrial systems. One of his first moves Roosevelt made was to counter the immediate suffering of the unemployed by a massive emergency federal relief effort. Most of the New Deal's early programs benefited both black and white Americans, but the strength of white Southerners and the Democratic Party and the complete lack of African American political power in the South caused African Americans to miss out on many of these programs.
Paul, that's cap. And I know he reading, whoever this one might do this, he reading. But basically what happened was, once Franklin D. Roosevelt got into the office, mind you, he put in the interstate system. Remember I told you how they put interstates in all of the black well-to-do areas. Now he's siphoning wealth and economic, socioeconomic status and power from us as well. So what he did was he came up with like FEMA, like relief for white people who were doing bad. Now he said it was for everybody, but it was never for everybody. Remember, they're slowly lifting them up and slowly pushing us down. Now, according to whatever this guy, One Mike, is reading, they're saying because of X, Y, and Z, we missed it or we didn't know about it. That's bullshit. That's bull crap. In this time, he's coming in, they're getting our economic power, they're getting our political power, they got us voting Democrats for the first time. Everybody kind of on the fence about that. And he's giving the whites more of an economic situation to be elevated amongst us.
One of the best examples of this is the Agricultural Adjustment Act, designed to protect farmers by giving them subsidies to limit production, thereby stabilizing the price of crops. The idea of the AAA was to lessen the production with increased agricultural prices, so farmers would be paid more to grow less. The program provided sharecroppers and tenement farmers with a part of the subsidy and allowed for rural relief agencies to dispense supplementary income to off-season wage workers. The program helped benefit African Americans mainly because it pumped billions of dollars into the economic sector in which 5 million African Americans worked for their livelihood.
That's not true. I gotta debunk this. So when all of these agricultural set-asides and all these things were put in place, remember Martin Luther King talked about this. I ain't gonna get monetized no way, but I ain't even gonna play it. But remember Martin Luther King talked about this. There were a lot of things put in place for white people that black people did not have, access to. And one of those things was in this agricultural situation. Mind you, we are losing a lot of land, a lot of farmland, a lot of our personal land. We're losing. They're giving land to them. Now they're setting these people up for success while we're being set up for failure. Now, yes, they're getting grants. Yes, they're getting all these set-asides. Hey, produce less and I'll pay you more. But the black people were not receiving those things that the white sharecroppers and all those people were receiving. We didn't get any of that. As a matter of fact, to this day, we still fighting for lawsuits and dealing with the agricultural stuff that they're doing with us in 2025. Like we've never been able to. Don't let them come up with all these excuses. Oh, well, we was gonna do this, but what happened was black people were asleep. See, they had a party that day, and then all the black people fell asleep, and they all woke up too late, so they didn't get a chance. No, girl, that didn't go like that. They put it in there and say it's for everybody, but you already know how it goes. You know what it is.
The money from the AAA slowed the exodus of black Americans from farming. But the AAA's...
And all of this comes under this New Deal that did nothing for black Americans. This New Deal is for white people coming in through Ellis Island and white people who are already here. That's what this whole New Deal is about, swiping the economic independence away from black America.
Actual results to black farmers was often contrary to the protections written into law and was often administered unfairly and corruptly. Local control of the AAA resided in the hands of the Extension Service and the county's Agricultural Conservation Committee, which represented all local farmers. But the county's agents were often the farmers themselves, and the committee mirrored Southern politics by simply excluding African Americans. African Americans were further disadvantaged by a system of unilateral bookkeeping and oppressive race relations between landlords and tenants. During the first 2 years of the AAA, black farmers complained bitterly that white landlords simply pocketed millions of dollars in relief checks that were supposed to be forwarded to the tenants. To make matters worse, some farmers simply evicted the sharecroppers and tenants from their land.
You see that? So they put all these set-asides aside for these quote-unquote new farmers and all these new people, black folks thinking that they can get it, and they can't. And these clear people are monopolizing off of this. And on top of them not assisting and helping out the black Americans at the bottom, on top of that, they putting their foot on their necks, jugging the knife in deeper by basically the ones, if you got them hired, fire them. Like they're making it harder and harder. Mind you, around this time, we losing land like crazy. We losing land like 90 going west between the homestead stuff, between the taxes, between all this stuff. That they coming up with all type of stuff. We getting hit left and right. We losing everything. And all these provisions are given to these clears.
Emergency Relief Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Public Works Administration, the Civil Works Administration. These programs were some of the only things standing between African Americans and starvation during the Great Depression. The FERA provided funds to local and state relief operations to restart and expand their relief programs. These programs pulled millions of Americans from the edge of starvation, and because African Americans suffered greater economic devastation, they received benefits at a higher rate than white Americans. In some northern cities, African Americans received 25 to 40% of the FERA's relief. Roosevelt's administration felt that direct welfare was the debilitation, so the government attempted to emphasize hiring unemployed for public works projects. The CWA was a temporary organization created to help people through the winter of 1933 to 1934, and the CCC built segregated camps to employ young men and remove them from poverty and hopelessness of urban areas. But once again, these tended to be less helpful to African Americans than white Americans. In the early days of the CCC, only 5% of the available slots went to young African Americans, and the FERA was only administered fairly in northern cities, and in the South, it rarely met the people who actually needed the help.
It wasn't distributed fairly in the northern states either. However, what they're trying to say is it was worse in the South. But all of these provisions are being put in place for these people. These are clear, broke, poor white folks coming in through Ellis Island without a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. And they getting all these provisions. That's these people. They walking right into provisions. And everything's being taken away from us. We haven't even accounted for the KKK. We haven't even accounted for the Great Migration. We haven't even accounted for all those other things that's happening to us. And remember, when these white folks get here, they let them know, hey, you better than them niggers. You above them. You got all free reign to do whatever it is you want to them. You could steal from them, kill them, take their land. You good. Because you up here and they down here. So imagine coming over here poor and white, getting all these things to set up in your favor, and it's a nigga over here talking about, can you please help me? Now you get it? Now you see why they tell us to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps that they know nothing about?
The time period and the Roosevelt administration was not completely bleak for African Americans. African Americans gained new influence and allies within the Roosevelt administration. Their experience reflects in an emerging consciousness among white liberals about the problems of African Americans and the potential electoral power of those African Americans. African Americans also formed new organizations to help fight for the economic and political rights.
And this is in the rise of all your fake ass black leaders. No shade to this woman, but this is now the rise of your W.E.B. Du Bois, your Frederick Douglass, your Booker T. Washingtons, all your black leaders about to arise. All your feds are about to start rising from the ashes like a phoenix. Okay. Now all your fake ass leaders about to pop up. All your leaders that you have were given to you. Why? This where all your fake ass leaders, all black people, this where we start to figure out, or we needed to figure out, that all skin folk ain't kin folk. Because now they giving us leaders and we blindly following them, thinking that these people have our best interests at heart, not realizing that these folks really working for them. They don't work for us. They work for them.
1931, black sharecroppers in Alabama established the Alabama Sharecroppers Union. In 1935, Mary McLeod Bethune founded the National Council of Negro Women, which serves as a civil rights organization for black women. The NCNW was designed to lobby for black women's interests with a special emphasis on employment opportunities. In 1936, John P. Davis and Ralph Bunchy formed the National Negro Congress and its youth organization, the Southern Negro Youth Congress. The NNC and the SNYC reached down to a grassroots level and recruited activists, students, workers to fight.
Okay, if there's one AI site builder you need to meet, it's
commercial. Y'all get the likes up on the video, please. Sorry.
Black men, women, and especially young people banded together in these new protest organizations to stage militant campaigns across the country. Activists fought to broaden the New Deal's programs, improve living conditions of African Americans, organize black workers into industrial unions, protest disenfranchisement, and protect African Americans from violence, especially lynching and police brutality.
So let me ask y'all a question. If Mary McLeod Bethune and other black leaders back then knew that the New Deal was not conducive for black Americans, oh, and by the way, we are the worst, we don't receive much from it, and actually it's not for us, why then would we have black leaders that would then go on to fight for us in such situation? Because the New Deal was not written for black America. It was written for white America. All of black America knew that. So then why would our leaders come out and promote this New Deal to us that doesn't benefit us? I would say it's the same reason why our leaders today promote immigration to us when it doesn't benefit us. Even to this day, we are promoted immigration. We are told that we got to be friends with the immigrants, or we got to be immigrant friendly, or we got to be sympathetic to the immigrants. Being anything to any immigrant does nothing for a black American. Having any empathy, sympathy, going to march, going to vote, even caring, that does absolutely nothing for black America. Yet and still, we're told that if we are black American, that we should care, even though it does nothing for us. That's the same thing was happening with the New Deal. Now you got activists telling black people to give a damn about the New Deal when it does nothing for black people. Why do we give up about the New Deal? If I'm a black American in this time frame, and I got these leaders standing over me, oh, y'all, we need to support the New Deal because black America, black America. Girl, we don't get nothing from the New Deal. Why is you over here talking to me about the New Deal? But these leaders were placed there strategically for you, to give you, remember I told y'all about the sheep herder and that whole analogy? Remember we spoke about that? I say all these celebrities, they're herders, they're shepherds, and they have sheep. That's their following, and they're supposed to herd their sheep in every direction that the powers that be tell them to do. That's what was happening with our Black leaders during this time. They were herding their sheep as well. Because I'm pretty sure the majority of Black America was telling these quote unquote Black leaders they can kiss their ass behind this new deal. But the history will never tell you that that happened. But this whole siphoning wealth and power away from Black America has been happening since they quote unquote told us about this slavery ending, and even before that. But definitely it's really started getting into full gear toward the ending of slavery, all the way up to the end of the civil rights era, which was the Martin Luther King civil rights era in Alabama, in Atlanta, in those areas. Okay. Now, this is a two-part thing because we're going to have to come back and finish this off because there's so much more we need to discuss as it pertains to this this economic wealth. And we'll come back and discuss it. I already wrote down where we left off because I want to talk about it. So like we would have to do like 10 parts of this. It's crazy. Like we would literally have to just break down angles and go by each angle. Like we can go social, we can go economic, we can go religious, we could go like it's crazy. It's so multi-layered. It's like a big ass onion. I swear to God, it literally is. William, oh my God, William, not you cutting up, huh? Thank you so much, William, so much for making it rain, and thank you so much for being here for Educational Friday. I truly appreciate you. Thank you, William. I make it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. Thank you, William. William says, happy Educational Friday. Thank you, beautiful. I love you. Thank you so, so much. Whitney B, thank you for the super chat, says, A. Malone designed J. Kennedy wedding dress. Ooh. What if these Malones are related to Krishan? Girl. What if this famous Black Malone woman who created this whole idea that we know of as these beauty schools, what if they relate? What if that's Krishan them people? Girl. Lord have mercy. That would have to be prior to The Hills Have Eyes. Have to be. You know what I mean? But A. Malone designed J. Kennedy's wedding dress. I'm going to have to look into that. Thank you so much. Dee Dee, thank you. Oh my God. Thank you again for the generous super chat. I appreciate you. I make it rain on them hoes. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. Thank you so much. Dee Dee says, I really appreciate you for your Educational Fridays. Keep doing what you are doing. Can't wait until your Rumble deep dives come back. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. And thank you, Dee Dee. Will we in June, July, next month? Deep dives is back. Deep dives back next month. I'm not sure if it's going to be every week, but for sure, we starting the deep dives back last month. I told y'all July 16th for sure. I'm 100% yours. And so deep dives, the Rumble deep dives is coming back July. Tell a friend. Y'all remember if you was around for the deep dives, it was lit. So make sure y'all around for it. Pull up, pull over, and pop out. Shout out to everybody in the building. Thank you, Dee Dee. And Alice, girl, y'all really caught up on this little Thank you so much. I make it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. Thank you, Alice Jane. I'm sorry for the super chat. She says, thank you for teaching the truth. This is so cathartic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Alice Jane. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. So yes, Rumble Gang, we will be back next month, July. 16 July officially is when I'm free, but I might bring it back the week of or the week before. So Rumble Gang, we back July. What else I said we got going on? There's a lot of stuff we about to pick back up on in July because I'm all yours. I work for you guys now, so it is what it is. But shout out to everybody in the building, y'all. I got to get off of here. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Remember, we will pick this topic up again. This is only part 1. And we've only covered a few things. I think what I'm going to do is go back to the drawing board and actually break this down into sections and attack it from that way. I think that'll be a better way for me to understand it because I'm a Pisces. I got to organize stuff in my brain and even in my eyes in order for me to understand it. So I think that's what I'll do. But with that being said, thank you to everybody for being here. Shout out to everybody in the building. If you haven't already, please do me a favor, like the video. Thank you to everybody who sent the super chat and even everybody who just popped in. Love y'all down to the ground, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
Can you hear me now? Oh, let's go. It's your boy Big Chew, the voice of the beat. You know what I want? Blaze up. Come on, blaze up.
It's the beat for me.
Wah, 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 for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Drop it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Do it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Come on, baby, we live. For your boy. For your boy. Hustle for your boy. Fix it for your boy. Drop it for your lift it up.
Mr. Carroll, how you give the voodoo doll time to talk? I don't get no fucking time to talk.
Who the voodoo doll is?
The nigga you just had up here.